Coincided with mounting legal pressures on the former president. Brazil's Prosecutor General Paulo Garnett has formally charged Bolsonaro and 34 others with attempting to overthrow the government. The charges including plotting to harm President Lula da Silva and Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes. Bolsonaro consistently denied those allegations, labeling them as political persecution. Eduardo Bolsonaro is a Brazilian congressman in his own right and the son of Jair Bolsonaro. He joined me to categorically deny these charges.
As you had the January 6th here, we had the January 8th in Brazil. Almost the same thing. And they say that my father was behind the scenes controlling the people. But wait a minute. They were trying to do a coup d'etat in January. January in Brazil is like August here. It's a whole vacation in the capital. In a Sunday, even Alexandre de Moraes, the justice for the Supreme Court, he was in Paris. And my father was in Orlando, in Disneyland. So imagine that. When you are not president anymore, you send elderly and the ladies unarmed to do a coup d'etat in a moment that there is no one in the capital. And while they were there on the Congress or around our White House, Jair Bolsonaro was texting, go back home, don't do that. This is the big dictator of Brazil that now the Attorney General is asking for 38 years in jail for my father because of that.
Today, Eduardo Bolsonaro declared his exile to the United States. But a pivotal moment looms as a panel of 5 Supreme Court justices is scheduled to convene on March 25th to decide whether his father, Jair Bolsonaro, and his associates will stand trial. If the court accepts the charges, Bolsonaro could face a trial that may result in very significant legal consequences. He could be disqualified as a presidential candidate and even jailed. Joining us now, federal deputy in the Brazilian Chamber of Duties, Eduardo Bolsonaro. Eduardo, are you seeking some form of political asylum or exile in the United States?
Yeah, I'm talking with my lawyers. They are considering about what to do. Asylum is on the table, so let's see what happened. But the decision is that I cannot come back to Brazil because this crazy justice from the Supreme Court, Alexandre de Moraes, who is the same, who is fighting against Elon Musk, who is the same that detained Mr. Jason Miller for 24 hours 2 years ago in an airport in Brazil, is asking for my passport. So he asked the Attorney General to seize my passport. And it's not comfortable. You'll be in a place working as a congressman where you cannot say what you want or represent your voters.
Yeah, this is remarkable news. A member of the government of Brazil, an elected member of what would be comparable to our Congress, now saying you don't feel, is it that you don't feel physically safe returning? You fear you might be arrested or jailed?
It can happen, and it would not surprise the Brazilians because actually there is a congressman. His name is Daniel Silveira. He is serving more than 8 years in jail because he did a video talking bad things to the Supreme Court justices. And at that time, President Bolsonaro gave to him the presidential pardon, but our Supreme Court waited to the opportunity when Bolsonaro was not the president anymore of Brazil. And for the first time in the Brazilian history, they canceled a presidential pardon. So this congressman, Matt, that is just like me and you here in the US, he's almost 9 years in jail because speaking.
Is there some thinking that your father might need to establish exile in the United States, seek asylum here?
My father, he says that he's going to be in Brazil, doesn't matter what happened. We know it's not a fair trial. Yeah? For example, Alexandre de Moraes, you had some articles from Greg Greenwald that had access of some of his assistants' WhatsApps. And during the conversations, these people were saying that Alexandre de Moraes would like to catch me, to get me. So I only can think that he would like to send me to prison. And it's just not safe be there in Brazil. My father, he cannot leave the country. He received the invitation to come to the inauguration of President Donald Trump. And the semi-justice, Alexandre de Moraes, he didn't allow my father to travel to the United States to attend to the inauguration. He has a travel ban. He doesn't have his passport anymore. And there is no reason for that. Absolutely.
Well, the reason would be if they don't want him to come here and establish asylum because they plan to jail him. There was this massive rally in Rio, tens of thousands of people filling the streets in support of your father, Jair Bolsonaro. How is that rally being perceived in the political circles of Brazil?
This is the only one reason that I can think that my father is not in jail, because he's so strong politically, and he for sure learned with Donald Trump's story when he was fighting against the lawfare in the United States, that this is not about law, this is not about a fair trial. You know, my father is not a corrupt. He lives at the same house. He has basically the same car that he had when he was president. He's very humble, very simple. And the people on the streets, they support, they intimidate somehow the Supreme Court of Brazil. So what the Supreme Court is trying to do now is trying to show to the international community that they are following some steps. Like, oh, we have a trial, we have here Attorney General doing the accusation, we have here the lawyers of Jair Bolsonaro, but this is all like, makes me feel like a claw, you know? All the cards, everybody knows what is going to happen. And what the Attorney General is asking is charging Jair Bolsonaro is for a punishment for almost 40 years in jail. So the situation in Brazil is, imagine if Donald Trump did not get reelected in November 5th last year, what would happen with him? So this is the situation of Jair Bolsonaro. And
well, by the way, the difference is he was allowed to run, Eduardo. That's the difference. Almost everything else looks remarkably similar. But the difference was at least Donald Trump was given the opportunity to vindicate himself before the voters. And what seems to be strikingly different about Brazil is that you've got Justice Moraes and others, the Attorney General, Lula, who are trying to stop the voters of Brazil for vindicating your father and the work he's done for the country. Now, there's this big decision coming on March 25th. The Supreme Court will review an effort to try to vindicate your father and not proceed with these charges. What are you expecting will happen in this decision process?
Oh, they're going to start the process. There is no doubt about that. For example, the five judges that are going to judge my father, one of them is the former lawyer of Lula da Silva. The other one is a former governor from the Brazilian Communist Party. And the others, they were all appointed by Lula da Silva or Dilma Rousseff, both former presidents. Dilma Rousseff, former president for the same part of Lula da Silva. So everybody knows what is going to happen. What we need to do is to expose what is going on in Brazil. And once they reach their goal, they are going to consolidate this regime. Then it will be very hard to Brazil, just as hard as Venezuela, to get out from this kind of regime.
Do you think ultimately, I mean, what you've described is very grim, Eduardo. You say it's not safe for you to go back. Your father is there holding rallies, demonstrating political strength, but at the same time, you say there's no fair process to determine him guilty or innocent of these fantastical charges that seem almost beyond belief. And now, are you worried that he's going to go to jail?
This is a possibility. But I think that our enemies, our opponents, they also do mistakes. For example, Alexandre de Moraes, he is having a big fight against Truth Social and Rumble in Brazil. He already censored American citizens that were tweeting from United States. So what Alexandre de Moraes is doing is he's invading the U.S. jurisdiction, just like the prosecutors of the ICC, Karim Khan, did when he tried to jail Benjamin Netanyahu. So as President Donald Trump sanctioned with OFAC sanctions this prosecutor and his team of investigators, we think that the same thing can happen with Alexandre de Moraes and stop the justice of the Supreme Court from all of this persecution. Well, the United States have to go back again to export freedom and not what Biden administration was doing, that's exporting American taxpayer money through USAID to indoctrinate journalists and judges in the other countries.
Yeah, I mean, the accusations have been made very directly that USAID has been a destabilizing force in Brazil, and we may be dealing with the downstream consequences right now. A man in exile, Eduardo Bolsonaro, making a plea that the United States fight for justice and